New York City just made a $12 billion deficit vanish into thin air. But the magic trick might actually cost taxpayers more in the end.
It really is like the ultimate disappearing act. I mean, you look at the balance sheet, the red ink is just gone.
Right.
And everyone applauds, but when you pull back the curtain, the strings holding this whole illusion together are pretty heavily frayed. And, well, they are tied directly to the wallets of future generations.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring Mayor Zohran Mamdani's newly announced $124.7 billion budget for fiscal year 2027. We are going to break down exactly how the city claims to have erased this massive $12 billion deficit.
And supposedly without slashing core social services or raising property taxes.
Exactly. And just so you know where we're getting our information, we are pulling from a bunch of different sources today. We've got local reporting from Beacon Reader and Politico, official press releases from the city council, deep dives from budget watchdogs, and even a pretty brutal Reddit thread from the Ask Economics community.
Yeah, that thread was intense.
It really was. Now, our mission here is simple. We just want to strip away the intense political rhetoric and look at the raw math. Mayor Mamdani, who runs on a democratic socialist platform, proudly announced a balanced budget. He funds universal child care. He hires 1,000 new teachers. He even creates a city-run grocery store program.
Which honestly sounds impossible when you remember they were staring down a $12 billion black hole just a few months ago.
Right. But this budget actually relies heavily on an $8 billion state bailout. Plus, they launch new taxes on the ultra-wealthy, and they use some highly debated financial engineering.
Yeah, conservatives and economists are pushing back hard on this. They are basically calling the budget a socialist experiment. They say it's built entirely on fiscal illusions and delayed debt.
And before we get any further, we need to make something very clear. The sources we are looking at are packed with highly charged opinions from both the political left and the right. We are not taking sides here. We're not endorsing any of these viewpoints. We just want to impartially unpack the facts and the arguments so you can understand what is actually going on.
So, to understand how you erase a $12 billion deficit virtually overnight, you really have to look at who is writing the checks.
Yeah. And right now, the biggest check by far is coming straight from Albany.
Exactly. Mayor Mamdani and Governor Kathy Hochul have this partnership going. The state literally injected $4 billion into the city budget this year.
$4 billion. That is huge.
It is. And that brings the total state assistance up to $8 billion over a 2-year period. It is a staggering transfer of wealth.
And this money directly funds major social programs, right?
Yeah, it does. The centerpiece is this historic $1.2 billion investment in free childcare. So now, for the first time, 2-year-olds get free childcare.
Wow.
Yeah, they are expanding the existing program for 3-year-olds, too.
I mean, let's look at the mechanics of this for a second.
Yeah.
Think about this state bailout like dealing with a maxed out credit card.
Okay, I like that.
You are staring at this massive crushing balance. But instead of cutting back on your lifestyle, instead of, canceling your streaming subscriptions or eating at home, you convince a rich relative to swoop in and pay off the debt for you.
Right, right.
So you get to keep living exactly as you were. You haven't actually fixed your spending habits at all. You just shifted the burden.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the mayor's supporters argue that the city isn't the irresponsible kid in that analogy. They argue the city is actually the wealthy parent who is finally getting paid back.
Wait, really? How does that work?
They point to what economists call a structural imbalance. We looked at this CUNY study, and it shows that New York City contributes 54.5% of all state revenues.
Oh, wow. Over half.
Right, but the city only receives 40.5% back in state expenditures.
Oh, okay. So the state takes that extra money from the city and uses it to fund upstate and suburban counties.
Exactly. So progressives argued the city has been severely shortchanged for decades. To them, this $8 billion bailout is just Albany returning money that already belongs to the city.
I mean, I get the math there.
Yeah.
But if you live out in the suburbs paying massive property taxes, you probably aren't buying the idea that you owe the city anything.
Oh, they are definitely not buying it. Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, he's been aggressively criticizing this. He literally called it daylight robbery.
Daylight robbery. That is strong.
Yeah. He points out that Long Island only received $1.4 billion in state aid. He accuses the governor of looting suburban families to fund the mayor's radical agenda.
So the suburbs are furious. But even with $8 billion from the state, the city still needed to generate its own cash to close the rest of the deficit.
Yeah, they had to look internally. And they decided to target the ultra-wealthy.
Okay, let's unpack this. They introduced this new pied-à-terre tax.
Right. A pied-à-terre is just a secondary residence. This tax targets non-residents who own secondary luxury homes in the city valued at more than $5 million.
So we're talking about someone who lives in Florida for tax reasons, but keeps a $6 million penthouse in New York just for weekend trips.
Precisely. And the mayor projects this will generate $500 million every single year.
Okay, and I got to push back on the math here. $500 million sounds great, but wealthy people employ armies of tax attorneys. If you hit them with a massive penalty, they aren't just going to write a check. Won't they just find loopholes?
You are hitting on the exact reason financial watchdogs are so skeptical. City Controller Mark Levine ran the numbers, and he estimates the tax might only raise $340 to $380 million.
Because of tax avoidance?
Exactly. People will use complex trusts or manipulate their residency status. In fact, an earlier study suggested the revenue could be as low as $232 million.
Which is less than half of what the mayor is budgeting for. That instantly creates a huge hole in this supposedly balanced budget.
And beyond the math, there's the real-world blowback. Billionaire Ken Griffin actually threatened to pull a $6 billion development project out of the city over this.
$6 billion. Just gone.
Yeah. And Donald Trump warned that this tax will just drive the rich away entirely. The fear is that if you aggressively target the top 1%, they will just take their capital and move to Texas or Florida,
leaving the middle class to shoulder the burden. So the new tax revenues are highly uncertain, which means the city had to use some controversial accounting tricks to officially balance the books.
Yeah, they really did. The biggest trick they used is a strategy called pension smoothing.
Okay, pension smoothing. That sounds incredibly harmless, but usually when a government plays with pension math, it's a huge red flag.
It is. So the city owes pensions to hundreds of thousands of workers, but the investment fund doesn't have enough money to cover all those future promises.
That's the unfunded liability.
Right. And legally, the city was required to pay off that massive unfunded obligation by the year 2032. But under this new budget, the city is stretching out the deadline. They're delaying the final payoff date from 2032 all the way to 2037.
Wait, they just moved the deadline back by 5 years.
Yeah. And that single maneuver instantly saves the city $1.64 billion in fiscal year 2027.
That is exactly like paying the minimum balance on a credit card.
It really is.
I mean, sure, it frees up cash today, but it forces the next generation to pay off the massive interest tomorrow. You're just kicking the can down the road.
And financial experts universally condemn this, that Reddit thread on Ask Economics. Economists there label this a fiscal illusion. They say the mayor gets the political credit today, but pushes a massive debt burden onto whoever is mayor in the 2030s.
And the financial markets notice this stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. Bond rating agencies have already downgraded New York City's debt outlook from stable to negative.
Wow. From stable to negative.
Yeah, because the city continues to spend more than it takes in. It's a huge warning sign. It means borrowing money will cost the city way more in the future.
So the mayor relies on state bailouts, risky wealth taxes, and deferred debt. But while he's doing that, the city council comes out and says, no, there is a totally different way to find the money.
Right. The city council argues they found $6 billion in alternative resources.
$6 billion.
Yeah.
Hidden right inside the city's own couch cushions.
Basically, yeah. They say they found it without raising property taxes or draining emergency reserves.
Where does that money actually come from?
Well, they found $3.5 billion just by re-estimating revenues. A big chunk of that, about $860 million, is unspent wages for city jobs that are currently vacant.
Okay, wait. They want to take the salaries of unfilled jobs and just spend that money on other things. What happens when they actually hire people for those jobs next year?
That is the exact concern watchdogs have. It's using temporary one-time savings to plug a permanent hole.
Right. And where did the rest of the $6 billion come from?
They found $2 billion in efficiencies. Things like forcing vendors into stricter competitive bidding for contracts.
Okay, but what does the council actually want to do with all this newly found cash? Do they want to pay down the pension debt?
Not at all. They want to use it to expand major social programs.
Of course they do.
For example, they want to expand fare fares, which would make subways completely free for low-income families.
Completely free subways. That's a massive ongoing expense.
Exactly. And they also want to boost a program called NYC Kids Rise. They want to give every public school kindergartner up to $3,000 for college savings.
Which is an amazing goal, But again, if you fund these permanent programs with temporary job vacancy money, you are creating a fiscal time bomb.
And that is exactly why budget watchdogs urge the city to stop adding new programs entirely. They point out a pretty terrifying statistic. In the last 10 years, city spending has grown $16 billion over inflation.
$16 billion over inflation. That is wildly unsustainable. So let's briefly recap what we've learned from all these sources today.
Sure. Mayor Mamdani successfully balanced a historic $124.7 billion budget.
Right, the $12 billion deficit is technically gone.
Technically. But he did it through a very fragile combination of things. $8 billion in state bailouts, highly debated taxes on the rich, and pushing $1.5 billion of debt onto future taxpayers.
You might be wondering, why should you, the listener, even care about municipal accounting? I mean, it's basically just math, right?
But it's not just math.
Exactly. A city's budget is a roadmap of its values. And more importantly, it's a warning sign of its future vulnerabilities. Understanding how these numbers actually work helps you see past the political talking points.
It really does. You start to see the difference between actual stability and, fiscal illusions.
So, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own. If a massive city like New York balances its budget largely because it currently has a friendly governor, someone willing to hand over billions of dollars, what happens to the city's survival the exact moment that political alliance shatters?
It's a scary thought. The illusion works today, but
tomorrow is a completely different story. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.